Hi and welcome to my OCR A-Level Biology revision with me, Christine. So here's the lesson on the brain structure, which is Module 5, Animal Response. So there are 5 regions of the brain that you'll be expected to identify if they give you a picture. Now the first one is the cerebrum, then you have the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. So let's look at each one individually. So the cerebrum is the largest and most developed part of the brain. Now, the brain is actually made up of about 86 billion neurons. So the majority of the neurons are located within the cerebrum. Now, it is highly convoluted, which means that it has lots of folds, and that means it's got an increased surface area so that it can house this many cells. Now, it is responsible for your higher brain functions, like your thought, your memory, and your reasoning. Now, they do not expect you to be able to identify the different regions of the brain, but they do expect you to know that this is where your higher brain function occurs. Now, this is where we are controlling our voluntary movement, and also this is where our sensory perception occurs. So our receptors are connected to our central nervous system via our sensory neurons. So our sensory neurons are going to go to the central nervous system, which is made up of, remember, our brain and our spinal cord. So the cerebrum, which is the biggest part of the brain, is where we're going to control this sensory perception. So the sensory neurons are going to be connected to the sensory part of the cerebrum. Now, not only is it going to have the sensory input received here, it's also going to process these complex bits of information. So things like language, problem solving, decision making, this is all happening within your cerebrum. And it's divided into 2 hemispheres. So therefore, it actually regulates opposite sides of the body. And therefore, it has a connecting section, which is called the corpus callosum. Now, if somebody has the corpus callosum severed, this actually means that they are not able to transmit the impulses from the opposite sides of the brain. So when somebody has a problem in a brain region, that is how they can identify what is going on based on which part of the body is not responding or not being sensed. So this is all part of your cerebrum. Then we'll move on and look at our cerebellum then. So our cerebellum is at the back and at the bottom of the brain. Now this is going to control the coordination of the muscular movements, the body posture, and our balance. So it's important that we understand that the input information goes to the brain, and then that is sent to the cerebellum so that it can coordinate those muscular movements and body posture and balance. So the cerebellum is about the coordination, not the receiving of the sensory input. That sensory input goes to the cerebrum. The coordination is through the cerebellum. So then we need to move on to our medulla oblongata. So the medulla oblongata then is the regulation of autonomic nervous system. Now I have done a whole video on the divisions with regards to our peripheral nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is the involuntary, subconscious responses. So controlling those reflex activities such as our breathing rate and our heart rate, and things like swallowing, peristalsis, coughing, because these are linked to our smooth muscles, and our smooth muscles are involved in controlling these reflex activities. We don't have a conscious thought about our breathing rate or our heart rate. It is about the monitoring that's going on that is signaling for our breathing rate or our heart rate to increase or decrease. So are we using our parasympathetic nervous system or our sympathetic nervous system? So it is important that you note that this is all interlinked. Then we look at our hypothalamus. So our hypothalamus is our main controlling region of the autonomic nervous system. So it's going to control lots of different things which are subconscious control, involuntary. So things like our complex behaviors, our feeding, our sleeping, aggression, monitoring our blood plasma, osmoregulation, what is the water balance, what's the blood sugar levels that are involved. So we've talked about the blood sugar levels when we looked at hormonal control and our release of insulin, but what you need to understand is that the hypothalamus will also monitor the blood sugar levels and then send electrical impulses to the pancreatic beta cells to release insulin if that is required, or to release glucagon if that is required. So this monitoring of the blood sugar levels is really important because the brain needs to have a constant supply of blood sugar levels because it cannot store blood sugar as glucose. And because it doesn't have the store of glucose in the form of glycogen, it needs this constant supply for respiration to occur so that the brain has enough ATP being produced for the necessary electrical impulses to be passed on. And the other thing you need to know about the hypothalamus is it does produce some hormones. The one you need to know about is ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which is involved in the osmoregulation. So very close to the hypothalamus is your pituitary gland. Now your pituitary gland is the one that is going to control most of the other glands in the body. And it does that through the production of hormones. So you have your anterior part of the pituitary gland, which produces 6 hormones, things like FSH, LH, TSH, GH. These are all hormones which, if they're going to ask you any questions about this, they will give you a little bit of information. So follicle stimulating hormone is to do with the reproductive system, luteinizing hormone to do with the reproductive system, and then you've got your TSH and GH, which are to do with growth, so the thyroid stimulating hormone and your growth hormones. Now the posterior pituitary gland is the one that's going to store the hormones which are produced by the hypothalamus, for example, ADH, and also where they're going to be released. So these hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus are going to be stored in the posterior pituitary gland, and then they will be released from the posterior pituitary gland when they are signaled to do so. So antidiuretic hormone is the only one that you need to know about. So I hope you've liked this video, and if you have, then please do click on the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also do check out my revision platform, www.aiqchat.com.